March 24, 1945. Deep inside the Combat Information Center of the destroyer USS Bush, northwest of Okinawa, the room was nearly dark. Only the cold green glow of radar screens illuminated the faces of the sailors on duty. The slow phosphorescent sweep of the SG surface search radar rotated across the display, painting ghost-like echoes over the black screen. Radar operator Seaman Second Class James Patterson leaned closer to the scope. He adjusted the gain knob carefully as another sweep refreshed the picture. Then the shapes appeared, several of them, moving fast. Incoming contacts, bearing 340, range 62 miles. He paused, counting the returns. Estimated 50 or more aircraft, inbound from Kyushu. Commander Roland Westholm immediately reached for the radio handset. Around Okinawa, Task Force 58 had deployed 16 radar picket stations. These destroyers formed a wide defensive ring around the invasion fleet. It was an invisible barrier, an electronic fence stretching across the Pacific sky. No Japanese aircraft could approach Okinawa without being detected. But none of the sailors staring at those radar screens understood what their advantage would provoke, because on the other side of the ocean, Japan had made a terrible decision. If American technology could not be defeated, then sacrifice would have to replace strategy. The kamikaze special attack units of the Imperial Japanese Navy had trained for one purpose only: break through the American defenses and trade their lives for enemy warships. The radar picket destroyers would become the first targets. Destroy the pickets, and the invasion fleet at Okinawa would lie exposed. The war had become a calculation. One pilot, one aircraft, one ship. By the final year of the Pacific War, American destroyers had evolved into something entirely new. They were no longer just submarine hunters. They had become electronic sentinels. Each radar picket station was positioned between 15 and 95 miles from Point Bolo, a reference point near Okinawa's Zampa Misaki Peninsula. 7 stations were already operational when the invasion began. 9 more would soon be added. Together, they formed the outer defensive ring of the fleet. Cutting through the rolling Pacific swells was the destroyer USS Laffey. Her Allen M. Sumner-class hull displaced more than 2,200 tons of steel and machinery as she moved steadily at 15 knots. Inside her Combat Information Center stood Commander Frederick Julian Beckton, studying the radar repeater scope. The ship carried 336 sailors, and it carried a devastating anti-aircraft arsenal designed specifically for the war they were now fighting. 6 5-inch dual-purpose guns mounted in twin turrets. 12 40mm Bofors cannons arranged in quad and twin mounts. 11 20mm Oerlikon cannons spread across the decks. But the real weapon aboard Laffey was not her guns. It was the technology guiding them. At the center of the system stood the Mark 37 gun director, linked to the Mark 25 fire control radar. Together, they formed one of the most advanced targeting systems ever installed on a warship. Inside the Combat Information Center, information from multiple radar sets was combined into a single tactical picture. Air search radar could detect aircraft more than 60 miles away. Surface search radar monitored ships within 15 miles. Height-finding radar determined the height of incoming aircraft. And fighter direction circuits linked the destroyer to American fighter patrols overhead. For the first time in naval history, combat was no longer purely visual. It had become electronic. The numbers told the story. Traditional anti-aircraft gunnery, relying on visual targeting, achieved hit rates of less than 2% against maneuvering aircraft. Radar-directed fire control increased that number to nearly 20%. And when combined with proximity-fused shells, explosives that detonated automatically when near an aircraft rather than requiring a direct hit, the defensive power of American ships increased dramatically. The sky around the fleet had become a lethal minefield. Lieutenant Howell Charing, commanding Landing Craft Support Large 51, understood the brutal reality of the radar picket mission. The destroyers were bait, deliberately positioned far from the fleet to attract enemy attacks. Draw the kamikazes toward the picket shits, then direct fighters to intercept them before they could reach the carriers and troop transports. But the men on those destroyers knew what that meant. They would be the first ships hit. Far to the north, at Kanoya Airfield in Kyushu, Japanese pilots were preparing for the largest suicide assault of the war. Lieutenant Yukio Seki reviewed the attack orders with the pilots of the 201st Air Group. The operation was called Kikusi No. 1, Floating Chrysanthemums. More than 350 kamikaze aircraft would strike the American fleet, supported by over 300 conventional bombers. The youngest pilot among them was just 17 years old. Their training had been short and brutal. 7 days learning formation flying and ship recognition. 2 days practicing takeoffs. 2 days flying in formation. 3 days learning how to approach and dive on a target. Navigation training was minimal. Escort aircraft would guide them toward the fleet. Once they were there, the pilots needed only one skill: aim the aircraft and dive. The kamikaze special attack units of the Imperial Japanese Navy had trained for one purpose only: